Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to just imagine something for a quick second here. Imagine looking at your paycheck at the end of the month and seeing absolutely zero deductions. I mean, no federal tax, no state tax, no looming dread of tax season every single spring. You literally keep every single dollar you earn. Sounds like a total financial fantasy, right? Well, for millions of people living in the United Arab Emirates, this is just everyday life. So today, we're going to unpack exactly how this wild system actually functions. Okay, let's dive into this. Zero. That's it. That is the exact amount of personal income tax legally paid by residents in the UAE. And no, it's not a glitch in the matrix, and it's definitely not just because the government there is feeling super generous. There is actually a deeply calculated, highly efficient financial machine operating right beneath the surface to make that 0% figure a reality. It's just a completely different way of running a modern nation.
Which obviously brings us to the ultimate mystery, right? How on earth does a country actually survive, let alone thrive and build these massive, gleaming, futuristic cities without taxing its citizens' incomes? Because if you talk to pretty much any economist, they'll tell you that governments desperately need taxes to survive. I mean, it's the absolute lifeblood for infrastructure, defense, and public services. Take it away, and things usually fall apart real fast.
The contrast here is just stark. On one side, you have traditional governments, like the US, the UK, Germany, and they basically survive through extraction. They take a slice of your income, they tax corporations, they slap on sales tax, property tax, payroll tax, you name it. That's the standard global playbook to keep the lights on. But then, on the flip side, you have the UAE model sitting there like this massive puzzle. Because if they aren't extracting money straight from your paycheck, how exactly are they filling the national treasury?
Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. You're probably sitting there saying, come on, it's just oil money, right? And look, it's easily the most common myth out there. People just assume the UAE is endlessly pumping barrels of crude out of the desert and using all those massive profits to just subsidize a tax-free paradise forever. But we really need to address that elephant in the room right off the bat, because the truth is way more complex.
And this brilliantly illustrates why that whole oil myth is fundamentally flawed when you actually look at the geography. Take Abu Dhabi, for instance. Yes, they absolutely possess massive historical oil reserves, but then look right next door at Dubai, where the reserves are actually highly limited. In fact, oil makes up just a tiny fraction of Dubai's economy today, and yet Dubai operates without charging personal income tax, all while boasting some of the most advanced, sci-fi level infrastructure on the entire planet.
So what does this all mean? Well, while the discovery of oil absolutely provided the massive initial seed money for the nation, oil only explains a fraction of the story today. It's the historical foundation, sure, but it is not the current engine. And if oil isn't footing the bill for Dubai's skyscrapers, its police force, and those massive highways, well, there has to be a secret economic engine driving the whole thing forward.
The answer is what you might call the ultimate business model. Honestly, a real game changer. To truly grasp how the UAE pulls this off, you kind of have to stop thinking of it as a traditional government. Instead, imagine it as a highly diversified, multi-billion-dollar mega-corporation. They don't just govern, they actively do business on a massive global scale. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer scale of this corporate portfolio. It's staggering. The government generates unbelievable state revenue through massive sovereign wealth funds. Think heavy hitters like ADIA and Mubadala. These act as huge investment vehicles, quietly buying up assets and generating massive returns all over the globe. Then you've got the state-owned enterprises. Obviously, there's EDNOC pumping energy, but they also own global travel and logistics giants like Emirates Airline and DP World. The profits from these globe-spanning mega companies flow directly back to the state, so they're essentially earning the capital that your government would normally just extract from you.
And they diversify so aggressively, positioning the UAE as basically the ultimate crossroads of the world. They dominate global logistics with their seaports, they act as the central hub for global aviation, and they rake in literal billions from international tourism and luxury real estate. Plus, they set up these specialized free zones with totally unique laws just to lure in foreign businesses. The country essentially acts as a massive landlord and service provider to the entire globe.
So that brings us to the human element in all of this. If the country operates like a mega business, who exactly are its best customers? I mean, why are wealthy entrepreneurs, crypto founders, influencers, and remote workers aggressively packing up their entire lives and relocating to the UAE? What's the massive draw here, beyond just getting to keep their whole paycheck?
Well, it's a combination of some pretty irresistible incentives. Beyond the obvious 0% income tax, they offer an incredibly frictionless lifestyle. We're talking top-tier safety, world-class infrastructure, and a super strategic geographic location nestled perfectly between East and West. Throw in highly favorable residency programs and a business environment with practically zero red tape, and boom, you've got an absolute magnet for high-net-worth individuals. And by attracting that elite demographic, they guarantee this constant, heavy stream of local spending and foreign investment, which just fuels their economic machine even more.
But, all right, here is where we need a bit of a reality check. I want to be perfectly objective about this. Living in a tax-free haven absolutely comes with its own steep financial realities. You might not be paying a direct tax on your salary, sure, but tax-free definitely does not mean free. At the end of the day, the money to run the society has to come from somewhere, right?
Let's move along and see how this builds up in everyday life, because these costs compound fast. First off, they introduced a 5% value-added tax, or VAT, on most goods and services. Then, bam, you get hit with government fees. We're talking high licensing fees just to start a business and steep fees for visas. Drive to work, you're passing through electronic toll roads. Buy an apartment, get ready for heavy property service charges. And that is all before you even factor in the super high costs of privatized housing, international schools, and mandatory healthcare. It's essentially this massive system of indirect consumption taxes. Basically, you pay a premium for exactly what you use. Which usually leads people to a very logical question. If this state as a corporation model works so incredibly well, generating all this wealth and grabbing the world's top talent, why hasn't your home country copied it? I mean, why couldn't the United States or the UK or Canada just drop their income tax to zero tomorrow and run their countries exactly the same way?
So the crucial point to understand here is that Western nations just have entirely different systemic burdens. You literally can't compare them apples to apples. Traditional nations have massive populations. We're talking tens or hundreds of millions of people to support. They maintain these huge, incredibly expensive public welfare and social security systems. They have astronomical defense budgets. Their demographic makeup and economic structure simply would not survive a sudden drop to 0% income tax. The math just doesn't work for them the way it works for a highly concentrated, specialized population like you see in the UAE.
So, to tie this all together, the UAE's economic miracle? It isn't magic. And it certainly isn't purely just oil generosity. It is a highly engineered, totally unique system. They survive because they smartly leverage that historical oil wealth to build massive, globally dominant state-owned enterprises. And today, they balance the day-to-day books through a complex web of indirect fees and consumption taxes. Basically, they don't need your paycheck because they found much more efficient ways to monetize the economy itself.
It's a fascinating paradigm shift, honestly. It really challenges how we view the whole relationship between a state and its residents, which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. Maybe the real question we should be asking isn't why the UAE has no personal income tax. Maybe the question is why the rest of the world has grown to depend on it so heavily. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.